Hey, today's video is about the Vedic astrology houses explained for beginners. And also, I made a video about how to make money according to astrology, and then I thought, as per usual, I have gotten ahead of myself because if you are actually learning with me, then I haven't even taught you the basics and how are you going to analyze your chart. So let's just cover the fundamental concepts of Vedic astrology, starting with the Vedic astrology houses, of course, as I said, explained for beginners. So this will be the first of my more educational series on my channel, which I don't yet have a name for, and I'll get back to you on that. So first of all, in Vedic astrology, we operate under the assumption that different areas of the sky correspond to certain areas of our life, and in those areas, there are zodiac signs that are showing up. Occasionally there are planets or other celestial beings that are showing up, but we call these areas of the sky houses, and there are 12 of them in total in Vedic astrology. Now these 12 houses somewhat correspond to the 12 zodiac signs, but they're slightly different, so I just wanted to make that distinction because we'll talk about zodiac signs in later videos. But as we're looking at the sky, the areas of the sky remain the same from our point of view. And it looks as if it's the sky that's moving, right? It's the zodiac signs that are moving through the houses, when in reality we know we're the ones moving around the sun. But we get that optical illusion that the zodiac signs are moving through the houses, and so that's the way that we study them in Vedic astrology. Now before we talk about the 12 houses in Vedic astrology, I want us to quickly look at the Vedic chart and understand a little bit about the houses. There are two very important areas of the chart that you need to understand. The most important houses in astrology in your life will be the Kendra houses, and those are the ones that are in the diamond looking area of the chart. The first house, the fourth house, 7th and 10th are the most important pillars of your life. Without these pillars, it will be very difficult to survive both on an emotional level but also on a physical level. And another houses that you'll want to look at is 1, 5, and 9. Those are called Trikon houses. Those houses are also very special in the chart. These houses deal with more higher level matters in life, like life purpose, and they largely show the blessings that we receive in our life. So let's go through all the 12 houses. So the first house of Vedic astrology is usually called the Lagna, the ascendant, or the rising sign, because it is the area of the sky that is at the eastern horizon, and whatever zodiac sign is rising when we're born becomes our ascendant or our rising sign, or as I mentioned, the Lagna. The Karaka, meaning significator of the first house, is the sun, because the sun is vitality. So naturally the first house is going to be about us, our birth, our physical body. And the first house specifically represents the head, so you can often see what someone is thinking by what the first house is made up of. In fact, in Vedic astrology, the first house is a dharma house, a house that has a lot to do with our life purpose. And when you look at the first house, you can begin to understand the major themes that your life is going to deal with. The first house can also represent a lot of other areas of your life, such as your health, how others perceive you, even fame. But these are more complex factors, and we're going to have to look at more placements than just your first house to really get an understanding of this area of your life. The second house in Vedic astrology is an Artha house and a Marka house. Artha meaning we gather resources and wealth, but Marka meaning death inflicting. The second house is a killer house. If you have no resources, you do not survive. It is a more difficult house. Its Karaka is Jupiter, because Jupiter represents things related to finance, and this is a house that is going to deal with a lot of financial resources and or our ability to retain these resources. Another area that this house can examine is your family lineage, because what determines what kind of resources you have in life? Well, early in our life, it largely has to do with our family, and in the traditional way of thinking, your lineage. The second house also represents your throat, so the second house can see things like your voice, your food intake, The third house in Vedic astrology is a Kama house. This means desires. This is a house in which you are going after what you desire and you're putting effort in order to achieve it. This house is ruled by Mars, so we're gonna see a lot of themes that relate to your courage and your bravery as well. How willing are you to put effort and go after the things that you want, and to what degree are you gonna fight for those things that you want? So it's an area of our life that largely deals with competitiveness in life when it comes to skills. The third house can also represent communication and self-expression. Now, while the second house represents your voice, quite literally, this is communication. Like, even things like social media can be seen from the third house. And as I was mentioning, our skills related to artistic expression can also be seen from this house. It's also a house that represents hands, which have a lot to do with our skills and artistic expression. Lastly, our siblings, especially our younger siblings, but also our neighbors, can be studied from the third house. The fourth house of Vedic astrology is a moksha house, meaning it deals with themes of liberation. The main karaka of the fourth house is the moon. The moon represents home and it represents your mother in your chart. Mars is another karaka of the fourth house because it represents land and or real estate. And lastly, Venus can also be a karaka for the fourth house because Venus deals with things like vehicles and other conveniences. Now, the fourth house in your chart represents your home life, literally your home, where you live and where you grow up when you're young. It also represents your mother, much like the moon. So from the fourth house, we can actually analyze the level of nourishment that you felt you had in your life, even your relationship with your mother. What was the quality of that relationship? And if not the mother, your maternal figures. Now, as I mentioned, Mars is a karaka of the fourth house. Mars represents real estate. So real estate can also be seen from the fourth house. Another area of your life that can be seen from the fourth house is your private life, your inner peace, because ideally you go home to find nourishment for yourself. Now, the fourth house is the most important pillar of your life because it makes you who you are, for better or for worse. And then when you grow up into adulthood, your home can become your sanctuary. So it's a very important pillar of your life. The fifth house of Vedic astrology is a dharma house. It represents life purpose once again. And the karaka of the fifth house is Jupiter. The fifth house deals with your children. It deals with studies, specifically up to college, but not postgrad, just undergrad. So it deals with your education. It also deals with your romance, with creativity and classical arts. But specifically, it also deals with things like speculative subject matter, such as the stock market or gambling. Now, the fifth house is a higher level of the third house. So if in the third house, we're looking at your skills like sports or even, drawing, singing, in the fifth house, we're going to see higher level, more established classical arts like opera, theater, ballet, painting. In the third house, we see social media. In the fifth house, we see things like cinema. As I mentioned, the fifth house also has to do with your education, but that can be also like informal education. What is your predisposition to learning in general? Also, the fifth house can show your approach to love and romance. The sixth house in Vedic astrology is an Artha house. Again, another malefic home. The karaka of the sixth house is Mars. Here, we're going to deal with a lot of themes that have to do with fighting, like your enemies, any debts that you might have to pay in life. The sixth house also represents your health and diseases, which is something else you have to fight. If you're sick, you're gonna have to fight the disease, right? From the sixth house, we can also see your daily routines, which may or may not involve your work, but it is not necessarily your job on its own. It can be seen to inform your idea of what is your job, because your job is largely a part of your routine, but by itself, it's not necessarily your job. And this is something that really confused me when I first started learning astrology. It is about your daily life, your daily approach to life. Now, in Vedic astrology, it is said that the sixth house holds your prarabdha karma, unchangeable karma from many lifetimes ago. So, in our lifetime, we go through life, and depending on how we treat people, right, we create our own karma. But what about the things that we created in previous lives? Those we're gonna pay in this lifetime, and those can be seen from the sixth house. So this is why the sixth house is largely seen as a malefic house, is a dusthana house, because you might experience suffering, and right, you're dealing with a lot of karmic situations. But karma can be good or bad, right? We can pay for the good things that we did in our previous life. We will also pay for the bad things that we did in our previous lives. But no matter what we go through, all of these situations are helping us grow. And that is how we can look at malefic houses. What is your life being challenged to help you grow? The seventh house is a kama house. It has to do with your desires. You desire to have a spouse. You desire to find true love. And Venus is the karaka of the seventh house, because Venus represents spouse in our chart. And from the seventh house, we can largely see our marital partner. We can also see, though, business partnerships and just general partnerships, which may be like friendships, but we pay closer attention to the potential of our spouse from this house. Now, the seventh house is also a marka house, death inflicting house, because your marriage is one of the hardest things that one might go through. The way that people talk about marriage sometimes is like this almost death sentence. And so your marriage could take away her life if you don't manage it well. So it is a slightly difficult house because of that reason. But as I mentioned, in this house, you can largely see the connections you will have with other people in your life. It doesn't just have to be marriage. It can be business. It can be friendships, relationships. Right now, you might say that we are in some kind of partnership if you decide to subscribe to my channel and watch my videos, because I have promised you to give you more new videos in the future. So it doesn't just have to be like a business, legal, official partnership. As I mentioned, I like to think about it more like your connection with other people. And in the seventh house, we can largely see like the public, because it is directly in front of the first house. It's almost as if who looks at you directly? Well, everybody else. And I almost forgot to mention that the seventh house is another huge pillar in your life. Whether you're married or not, your partnerships in life are a huge part of your life. The eighth house is another dusthana house. It is malefic. It deals with the darker side of life and the mysteries as well. It is another artha house, resources of other people. Another marka house, death inflicting. But as I mentioned, the eighth house is a house of liberation, because it could like literal liberation. Like if you pass away, you are liberated from this earth. So that's a lot. So let's just break it down. Saturn is the karaka of the eighth house. And in the eighth house, we largely see transformation. Things like literal death, but also metaphorical death and rebirth. Sudden ups and downs in our life and how we deal with them. The eighth house also represents uncovering what is hidden, such as occult knowledge. Like right now, this is an eighth house matter, astrology. And lastly, another huge area of our life that the eighth house deals with is our sexual desire, or more intimate matters in our life. Because technically, that's kind of a hidden part of our lives, or at least it is not socially acceptable to really put it out there. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, or that it's not, or that it's wrong. I'm saying that as a society, people have collectively agreed that this is largely an area that we share with very few people. And lastly, this house deals with resources because it deals with obtaining resources from others, like things like inheritance, which is a sudden event in life. Can't really plan or make an inheritance happen unless you want to go to jail. But also things like taxes or joint resources. So when you get married, right, now you and your spouse come together and you have shared resources. The ninth house of Vedic astrology is a dharma house. Again, it has to deal with your life purpose. The karaka is Jupiter. Because Jupiter represents guru, your teachers, represents wisdom. But see, wisdom is higher learning, not just like random facts and figures, but postgraduate studies or you studying literally religious texts, spirituality. Your morals and your philosophical beliefs can be seen from the ninth house. Now, the ninth house is also the house of luck because in the ninth house we can study the father figure, and traditionally what would determine somebody's fortune or potential for fortune, it would be your father. Like again, this is a very traditional way of thinking. We no longer think about our lives in that way, but the ninth house can look at your father and separately just your own luck in life. How do you create luck in your life, or the potential for opportunities in your life? Because this is a house of higher studies, we can also see things like publishing from this house. Sharing knowledge in a teacher-student setting can be seen from this house, and your relationship with those teachers, as I was mentioning. Now, from the ninth house, we can also see long-distance travel. While the third house deals with short-distance travel, so maybe you stay within your state when you travel on the weekend. In the ninth house, you actually go maybe to another area of your country. And this can be for fun, but it can also be about religious pilgrimages, because the ninth house, as I was mentioning, can deal with your spirituality or religion. The 10th house in Vedic astrology is an Artha house, and the karakas for the 10th house are the Sun, Saturn, and Mercury. Now, most people talk about the 10th house as if it's related to our career, but what is most important that you understand about the 10th house, it is the area of our life in which we exert authority and in which we're gonna play out karmas that we're here to deal with on a societal level. And so that's why it kind of gets delegated as your career house, but there are many significators in your chart that can point to your career. In the 10th house, we're going to focus on your authority, because your authority might be that you're a nourishing person that uplifts, empowers other people, but your technical job might be that you're a teacher. It's just a slightly different way of thinking of the 10th house that also kind of brings some confusion when you're a beginner. In the 10th house, we can also take a look at your social status and your leadership. The 10th house represents this area of the sky in which the sun is most visible, so right at the top of the sky, which is why reputation and public image can be seen from the 10th house as well. Not necessarily just fame, like I said. You could be recognized in your community as somebody that brings nourishment to people, but you might not necessarily be famous. So largely your professional achievements can be seen from this house, but largely it refers to what service you provide to society. And this is why Saturn is a karaka of this house, because Saturn has a lot to do with karma, what karmas we're here to deal with in this life. So what role and what karmas are you here to play in our society? And largely what unites us often ends up being our career. Now, the 10th house is the 4th Kendra house. So again, those are the 4 most important pillars of your life: yourself, your home, your spouse or partnerships if you're single, and your career or service to society. Let's talk about the 11th house in Vedic astrology. This house is a Kama house, has to deal with your desires, fulfillment of your desires, whether it be monetary or just your hopes and wishes for your life. As such, the significator karaka is Jupiter. From the 11th house, we can study your ability to create income or gains, monetary gains in your life. Now, this is separate from the 2nd house. The 2nd house takes a look at your ability to retain resources. So the 11th house takes a look at how much money you're making though. And you can make a lot of money but have a lot of expenses and retain very little in the bank. So that's why they're a little bit different. Another area that we can see from the 11th house is your social networks. And I don't mean social media, I mean your coworkers, your friends, your connections with people in life, large organizations that you might belong to in your free time, or like I said, your job. A lot of times we can create wealth through our connections, which is why they're in the same house. We all have had that experience where having our friend got us into the right place or help us have a place to stay at a vacation. We can't really put a monetary figure on those things, but they're bringing gains to your life. Okay, lastly but not least, the 12th house of Vedic astrology is a moksha house. Deals with liberation, which can be like this liberation or this liberation. It is it is said that the soul leaves the body through the 12th house in Vedic astrology. The karaka of the 12th house is Saturn, and in this house we're gonna see largely big themes of spirituality, isolation. From the 12th house we can see your approach to your spiritual beliefs, meditation, introspection. Because this house deals with isolation, and you kind of need withdrawal and isolation in order to become spiritual, or through isolation you end up getting into spirituality. So generally just withdrawal from the material world. This house also deals with jails, hospitals, asylums. It is a house that represents losses, which can be monetary or just in general. This house also represents long distance travel. So the 3rd house is short distance travel. Maybe you're in the town or your state. The 9th house is longer distance travel. Maybe you're still within your country. The 12th house, you go to a completely foreign country, or maybe you're inside the country but it's completely different town where like you don't know the same customs, you behave completely different, you feel like a total outsider. Maybe the language is different even, but it can be just more foreign lands, foreign travel. Now in the 12th house you can also see your hidden enemies, and if you take a look at the Vedic astrology chart, the 12th and the 6th are right across from each other. The 6th house deals with your known enemies, and your 12th house deals with the hidden enemies that we often can't see until the last minute, right? And this kind of is related to losses. If you know about an enemy last minute, you feel like you have lost something in your life, right? You didn't expect it to come from this person. The 12th house also deals with matters of bed pleasures, and it largely deals with a person's subconscious mind as well. Now for all of these reasons, the 12th house is also a malefic house. We tend to experience grief through this house, but not just that, because depending on our placements, going to long distance travel to a foreign place can bring good things. So we always have to judge all of our places together like a huge symphony. You can't just listen to one instrument, you have to listen to the whole orchestra. So remember, as you're beginning to understand your Vedic astrology in general, but your own chart specifically, be sure to withhold any judgment until you're more of a medium, intermediate level student. Because trust me, all along the way, I was like, oh, I have the worst chart. And yeah, I have not the best chart, but like, not everything is as bad as I originally thought, because there's a lot of things that you gotta take into consideration. So long story short, keep learning to really understand what your chart is about. So this concludes my video of the Vedic astrology houses explained for beginners. I really hope that this was a helpful video. Let me know in the comments, would you like me to talk about the zodiac signs next or the planets next? I have gotten a few questions about when are birth charts coming. I'm building my website, but yeah, sign up for my newsletter if you want to know when birth chart readings will become available. But yeah, thank you for watching. If you still are, subscribe if you like to continue talking about Vedic astrology, and I'll see you in the next one.